So hi everyone and welcome to CMSMC's Material Culture Career Path event this evening. My name is Mary Kate Swinsky and I am the Operations Director for CMSMC. For those who don't know, the Coalition of Master Scholars on Material Culture, or CMSMC, is a platform born online dedicated to helping emerging and established Master Scholars by providing a space to publish their work and contribute to the expanding field of material culture. If you're wondering about ways to get involved or support CMSMC, there are several opportunities. We invite you to join our newsletter, which I'll share a URL for in the chat later on, and that will keep you up to date on CMSMC happenings, including our publication, which will be going live next week. We are switching from a weekly publication model to an annual publication, and our inaugural issue will be coming out on a new day, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. But we also have many wonderful articles currently on our website as well if you want to check those out. CMSMC also sells merchandise and we do have a Patreon, and we're completely funded by your support, and any financial contribution is greatly appreciated and helps support our mission. On a technical note for tonight's event, you can feel free to keep your cameras off and mute. You can use the chat, and I will be turning on closed captioning in just a second if you need it. And our wonderful speaker tonight is Anne Cannon, who is the Associate Curator of American Art at the Fenimore Art Museum, where she has worked for the past 5 years. Her areas of specialty are 19th century American art, print culture, and folk art. She's currently in the process of organizing an exhibition of the works of Mary Cassatt and Fenimore shows, with apologies if I did not pronounce that right, slated to be on view at the Fenimore in summer of 2025. Tonight's outline will start off with Anne giving us an overview of her career path, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. I have a couple prepared ones, but we love to have you all throw those in the chat. And so without further ado, I'll hand it over to Anne to walk us through her career.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary Kate. And thanks for everybody who is joining in. It's great to be able to talk to you all. So I got my start in art history, as everybody does, as an undergraduate student. I went to Hartwick College, where I majored in art history and got kind of conned into getting a double major in French by a French professor who dangled a study abroad in my face like a carrot. But how can you say no to that? After Hartwick, I did internships, and I ended up getting my master's at Boston University with a certificate in museum studies. And that was just a really great 2 years where I got to really immerse myself in Boston, the art scene there, learn from some really great people. And I was actually able and fortunate enough to intern at the MFA Boston, surprisingly not in Art of the Americas. I was an intern in Art of Europe, which was just at the time down the hall. So I would watch the posse of American art historians and curators kind of walk through on their way to lunch and just kind of fawn at them wow, maybe one day I'd be one of them. But that was really, really an influential part of my career and my, ability to progress to my current role. Having at least one big institution under your belt really kind of stands out on a resume when you're just kind of, right out of grad school, just begging people to hire you, sending out all of the resumes that you can and the CVs that you can. And the timing just worked out perfectly with Fenimore. I'm from the Cooperstown area where the museum is located. So, growing up, I'd always gone to Fenimore. I had done things in college for them, working in visitor services, interning wherever they had an opening. So, I had some experience in development, membership, education, wherever they would, take me pretty much. And I started as an admin assistant actually in the collections department and slowly worked my way up these past 5 years. And that's how I became, I guess, who I am today and what I'm doing now.
Thank you so much. Like I said, I have a few prepared questions to get us started.
Absolutely.
And so my first question for you, Anne, is what are the most vital steps someone should take to prepare for a career in this field? And are there any required skills that you think people need?
Well, as a curator, you're constantly learning. You have to kind of become the expert in whatever you're pitching for the museum to be, putting on as an exhibit. So you need to really want to and have that drive to just continue learning, be a lifetime learner, and be interested in whatever is thrown at you. Sometimes in my role, I'll be told like, oh, you have to put on this exhibit of, oh, I don't know, pick a random artist that maybe you don't know much about. And you're just like, okay, cool. Let me try to pull something together. I think recently we were trying to figure out a way of potentially doing a Georgia O'Keeffe Yayoi Kusama show. So it was trying to like, tease together and pull out all sorts of things that we could potentially use. So having that drive and desire to continue learning, as well as being open to whatever comes your way. It's always, I started the way that I started just to get my foot in the door. So to be able to just kind of take whatever job is open and make sure when you're doing your interviews to ask if there's room for advancement. Is there opportunities to go one step further at the institution? If they say no, get out of there, because you don't want to get stuck in a role where you're not progressing. Does that kind of answer that question? Was there another part of it that I completely forgot?
That's pretty much covered it. Yeah, required
Okay,
skills,
great.
being able to be adaptive and everything.
Perfect.
My next question is, do you have any professional experiences unrelated to this industry that allowed you to excel in your current position?
Yes. Weirdly enough, waitressing. One of my, I spent a few summers waitressing at a country club in the area, and being able to kind of put on that almost like schmoozy, you almost, I don't know how to properly and like eloquently explain this, but the ability to kind of put on a hat of sorts and become somebody else and become, able to converse with people that you necessarily would not want to be conversing with on a regular basis, schmoozing donors, impressing people, like that type of thing. That's definitely something that has surprisingly played like a big role in what I do now when it comes to, meeting with potential collectors, or even at like networking events, being able to, like, if you're somebody like I am who's like ever so slightly anxious in those types of social situations, to be able to kind of like compartmentalize like a waitress does and just kind of like, and then you're there and you're not paying attention to the craziness that's happening in the kitchen or the people who are complaining about their food. You're just focusing on one thing and doing that well.
No, I feel the same way. I've not been a waitress, but working as a tour guide, I feel like you just have to develop some of those public speaking skills.
Yeah, that like, and that thicker skin when
Yeah,
you do like
on your talking
people.
persona.
Yeah, exactly.
My next question is, what do you think is the best way to earn an internship or a job in the museum industry or the art industry?
I think, let's see, it's all about the connections that you make. So if you're able to, at a conference, sit down and talk to one person who potentially has a connection at another museum, or somebody who's well known in the field, and then utilizing that connection, immediately emailing or like sending something that says like, hey, it was great connecting with you. I hope that we can connect again, so that you're memorable. That was a big thing that I was taught, as well as, buffing up that CV and, name dropping when you can, because the field is so much about name dropping. It's kind of upsetting, but it's a fact of art history and the curatorial field. Everybody needs to know who you've rubbed elbows with, who you've worked with, if somebody likes you, and like, it's a lot of that. And it's a lot of just, being persistent in your applications, making sure that you sound good, reading through the institution's mission and making sure that whatever you're saying in your cover letter really lines up with that, or use some of the same buzzwords. That was something else that I was taught, because it's it's all about making you look like you're meant for that role.
I see a question in the chat before we get to this one. Building off of that, if networking is incredibly important, do you have a mentor who's helped you in this career, or how have you kind of built your network?
Yeah. So again, I always go back to my time at the MFA Boston. So I'm still really good friends with the director of Arts of Europe, who knows, it's scary how many people he knows. But he was hugely influential when I was applying for jobs, using him as a reference, telling him what jobs I was applying for, and he somehow always knew who was on the hiring committee or something like that. It was a little creepy. Not creepy, but it was a little like, whoa. But so he would then, go out of his way to maybe put in a good word, or, I could suss out like, oh, are they somebody that would be fun to work with? What are your thoughts? So I think that's one of the big things. Frederick was and is still great. I mean, he comes to Cooperstown now like once a year. It's kind of fun to be able to like show him around my museum. But yeah, and currently I have another really great mentor who I've been lucky enough to work with on a couple exhibits now, who is also one of those people who like everybody knows in the field. She was one of the curators for that big John Singer Sargent show that's currently at the MFA. So yeah, not to brag, subtle brag.
Yeah, casual, cool, very cool exhibition that just opened.
Yeah.
We have a question in the chat. Do you think it's beneficial to start at a small local art museum in order to move up to a more well-known institution?
Absolutely. I think, it's all about what works best for you and what your end goal is. Small institutions can be great because you're able to wear a lot of different hats in the roles that you're given. For example, at Fenimore, we're a very small staff. So I'm curator, but I am also, when we're doing exhibits, one of the exhibit preparators. I've just learned how to put new backing boards on paintings, do a little bit of conservation work, you do a little bit of exhibit design. You basically get to experience everything, which then in part helps to better figure out what you want to do in the museum. If you're still kind of undecided, if you want to be in a more curatorial role or a more collections-based role, that can really help to inform your career path. And it might also inform, do you want to be able to do all of that stuff, or do you want to just focus on one aspect of the job that you want to do really well? If you're at a larger institution, the curator would not be doing, the hanging and the, gallery design as much as I do in my role at a smaller institution. So it's all about what your end goal is and what you see yourself and think that you want to do in your job, if that helps.
Another question from the chat is, how did you find your niche in terms of field research? Was the field you wanted originally, then moved forward linearly?
That's a really interesting question. So I started my art historical journey as a 19th century European person. That's what I focused on with my master's. That's what I got my internship in at the MFA. And then this role opened up at the Fenimore. And that's when I kind of started to make myself into an Americanist, so to speak, to fit the role. And I started to really enjoy it. There's just, there's not really any explaining it. It just kind of happened. And that's kind of the beauty of art history too. Like when you start with a more general, undergrad, you think you know what you want to focus on, and then that might take a complete 180 turn or 360 turn. Who knows? I knew somebody who went into her program thinking that she wanted to study 17th century Dutch still lifes, and now she's doing a PhD at Harvard focusing on 19th century German expressionists. So you never know what ends up kind of like singing to you when you're starting to do that research and that focus, or if there's a specific painting. For me, there was one painting at the Fenimore that has always just like fascinated me, and being able to work at the museum, it finally clicked in my brain like, oh, I like William Sidney Mount, and that's why it works now. Like this makes sense. These, like everything else kind of built to a better appreciation for the American art.
And I think kind of building off of the second question of, were you able to explore other areas as you grew professionally? And if so, what is your favorite secondary emphasis?
In research, it's always going to be the 19th century European, the Impressionists. When I was at the MFA, my job was to just like go through those Monet files. So I became very well acquainted with Le Japonais. So like, yeah, French Impressionism and Japanismo, that whole movement is always just like really fascinating to me. And then in a career, if I had been better at science, I would have loved to have gone into art conservation, but chemistry just did not, it didn't stick in there.
Another question from Gwen is, what are the ways in which your museum studies degree best prepared you for your current role?
Ooh, that's a great one. So my museum studies, the way that the way that Boston University does their museum studies certificate isn't quite as extensive or intensive as an actual master's program in museum studies. For me, it was basically I took 2 extra classes and then other art history courses that were being offered fit within them. So I took like a history of museums class, which I think everybody who's interested in museums ends up taking, where you just learn about like the do's and don'ts and how different museums operate. And then most of my other courses were art history courses that focused on like different museum experiences, so to speak. Like there was like African art in the city, where we looked at 2 different institutions and how they differed in terms of budget and what they're able to put on and how they're able to interpret their art. And then my internship counted as well as another course load. So I think just always the idea of like teamwork, working on a team. I know a lot of museum studies courses, the one that I took as well, there was a lot of group work, and that really helps to prepare you for when you're in the field and you're being put on these departmental teams where you have to work with a lot of different personalities, and how do you juggle all of that and still be able to put out a product that the public is going to enjoy. So I think definitely the group work aspect played a key role. Yeah.
Absolutely. We do have another question, and it has to do with salary and finances of the museum job world.
Oh, you
Do
don't
you
get into
find your
this for the
salary?
money.
Yeah, I know, very important questions. Do you find your salary a livable wage, or do those who work in museums need to have a 2 income household? Skylar says that she is not trying to be nosy about your pay, but as a master's student in public history and trying to think of career.
Oh yeah, no, you're fine. You're fine. It's a really valid question. And I mean, it's, after was it AAM that made all of those salaries transparent? After that, it's a big, contentious a talking point, especially with smaller museums where they don't have the budget necessarily to be giving you all sorts of monies. But I think I definitely I am single. I don't have another income person in my household. So I'm able to live off of it relatively comfortably. Cooperstown in and of itself is like a weirdly difficult, like high cost of living in the area because of, the hospital and a lot of doctors with doctor salaries that bump up the cost of living. But I think it's doable as a single income. I know a lot of people at our institution who do it. But again, it's always, that's one of the big factors when you're asking and looking at these jobs is, what is your salary cap and what is the salary range? And is there, is there room for that to improve? Do they do, raises every year? How does that work? What's all of that stuff? And there's like a more there's tactful ways of being able to kind of discuss that in an interview where it doesn't just sound like you're mostly focused on the money. But I mean, we're all focused on the money. Let's be real.
I agree. You need money to live. So
Yeah. They don't want us destitute.
exactly. Yeah. We have another question from Nina. As an older returning graduate student, I wonder how you were able to get an entry level position in a museum space that usually requires like 3 to 5 years of experience. And so, yeah, how you kind of worked around that, as most entry level jobs kind of ask for multiple years of
Yeah.
experience.
So as I mentioned before, I started at Fenimore as I kind of just tried to get whatever job I could and then impress the crap out of them. So I started as sorry to swear, I started as an admin assistant in collections. and was able to impress my supervisor and the president of the institution, who had never had another art history person in the institution, which is kind of crazy to me. He was the only curator at the time. I impressed him enough to create, this is like very much like not a normal situation, but I do emphasize the fact that it is crucial to just get your foot in the door as you can and ask those questions about advancement. So with that little, warning there, he created the assistant curator position that I had been in for like 2 years, and then I impressed again enough to get bumped up into associate curator. So again, you need to be asking in your interviews, is there room for advancement? What is the typical career trajectory that you experience or expect for somebody that you're starting as an assistant curator? Can I be bumped up later? Is that? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yep, and we have a thank you from Dina.
Great.
One has a question: how do you stay up to date on what's happening in the museum world outside of the museum where you work? Do you have a resource recommendation like podcasts, specific publications, etc.?
Yeah, I'm a sucker for hyperallergic. I get the alerts on my work email, so when I have downtime, I can search that. There's also a really great podcast that I'm blanking on the name of right now. That I'm gonna look that up after this and send it out so that everybody can know it. But it's great because they interview. Gosh, I wish I could remember. Art history. It's like art history notes or something like that. Each episode, they interview different curators in the field or scholars in the field about a specific project they're working on, so you can kind of hear what's happening. Sorry, it's gonna bother me now that I can't remember the name.
But yeah, if you think of it later, we can absolutely email.
Yeah. This is embarrassing. I'm so sorry.
Oh, is it Modern Art Notes?
Yes. That's it.
Our co-founder with Tyler Green, our co-founder, is sending me a prize.
Yes, Tyler, he's great. I also I follow him on Instagram too, so he's always kind of like posting like the troubling things that he's seeing in institutions and what we should be doing better. So it's great. And he did a great it was like a colloquium seminar that was an optional thing that you could do online, where he was looking at troubling things or how we're interpreting different pieces of art. It was all about like blackness and whiteness in the museum. It was great.
Speaking of curators coming on talking about their current projects, do you want to tell us about the exhibition you're working on right now?
Yeah, so this has been like a passion project that I have had in my brain since undergrad. I've always been interested in Mary Cassatt, and then her French counterpart, Berthe Morisot, who, she's huge in France. We don't really hear that much about her here, but she's in some really big collections. And she basically, you look at the two of them together, and, Cassatt was this like great independent lady who, didn't need a man. She could do it all on her own. And then you have Morisot, who married Edouard Manet's brother, had a child, but then said, but I'm still going to paint because that's what I love to do. So they're these great like point counterpoint, and they're always kind of depicted, or have always been depicted, as rivals throughout, the old art historian and art history rhetoric about, women can't be friends, they have to be rivals. But in reality, they actually were friends, and they would exchange letters, and they were both influenced by a Japanese prince in the 1890s, and there was a period where they were working together. So this will be the first exhibit since 1930 to have both of them together solely as Cassatt and Morisot, without any of the other impressionists. And it's all about how they kind of influenced one another in their exploration of, a looser, sketchier painting style, as well as their interest in the etched medium, because both of them began experimenting with etching kind of at the same time when they were living in the countryside of France, about like 10 miles from each other. So it's going to be really exciting. I'm thrilled. working on getting our loans together. We've got a few confirmed, so it's just, yeah, it's coming together. And we're
Excellent.
gonna
When are
be,
you anticipating opening?
oh yeah, so it'll be opening May of 2025, and it'll run throughout the summer. So it'll close probably Labor Day in
I have to
25.
put Cooperstown on my calendar.
Yeah,
I'm
and
gonna check.
we'll be publishing a catalog with an essay by Nancy Mel Matthews, the noted Cassatt scholar. So that'll be available as well to purchase if you can't make it to the show. But yeah, it's really exciting.
That sounds amazing. Do we have any other questions from the audience? If not, I'm just going to leave it to Anne. Do you have any other advice that you would like to share with people who are looking for a position in the field or looking to move up in the field, or even just starting out? Just any general advice you might want to, that you wish your old self had known, perhaps.
Oh gosh. Just don't be afraid to put yourself out there. If if there's something that you see being advertised, be it an internship or a job position, and you're like, maybe, just go for it. It never hurts to put in your application, to put in all of your references, all of that stuff. The worst they can say is no, and then you just move on. So just, keep going. I wish you all the best of luck. Yeah, what happens happens, and you'll find the position that you're meant to be in.
Excellent. Well, with that lovely final piece of advice, thank you all so much for attending tonight. And we will have a recording of this up on our website and on YouTube in a few days, hopefully. And I'm happy to share Anne's email if she's comfortable with that, if any of you have any
Absolutely.
follow-up questions. Well, thank you all and have a wonderful evening.